What's all this about MIDI controllers and control surfaces? Anyway, okay, 1981, the music manufacturers got together and decided to come up with a protocol for keyboards to communicate with computers, and it's called MIDI, Musical Instrument to Digital Interface. Musical Instrument to Digital Interface. And they decided several things. One, that there will be 16 MIDI channels. So each keyboard or controller that you have can run down a separate channel to a separate virtual instrument or a separate synthesizer. They also decided that middle C is the number 60. Bam. Okay, so C sharp is 61. The C above is 72. The C way below is 48, etc. They decided again that playing something very soft as opposed to something very loud is to be sending 0 to 127, which is actually 128 numbers in computer language. And you may have come across 64, 128, 256, 512. These are very important numbers in computer language when you're talking about MIDI. This expression pedal is sending 0 when it's all the way down. And it's called a continuous controller in that it sends just a stream of data as it goes up to 127 and all the way back down. And this could be a volume pedal, which is continuous controller channel 7, or it could be, you could set it to be the cutoff on a filter sweep, 72, I believe, in general, and just about anything. If it's plugged into a keyboard that accepts expression pedals. So what you need to do is open up an Ableton session. Let's get that happening. This is a brand new Ableton Live 10 session. 2 MIDI tracks, 2 audio tracks come standard. I'm going to just get rid by selecting and deleting the audio tracks. If I hit Command-Shift-T, can I do that with one hand? Yes, I can. I get another MIDI track, or I pull down Create, Insert MIDI track. What we need to do is first get a synthesizer dropped into one of the MIDI tracks. Analog. If I take this analog instrument and drop its folder onto a MIDI track, I will get what's called the initialized sound. Not all that exciting. So I can either hot swap it with something else with this little hot swap button or delete it altogether. I know that analog instrument makes very good bass sounds, so I'll just randomly choose one. Drop it in. Okay, cool. And I'm actually playing that on my push right now, which is a control surface. I'll talk about that next. But I want to get a couple more instruments in here. Let's see. Let's just drop in a drum rack. And I'm going to just test the sounds here. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, folks. Bring that down. And let me put it on the bottom end. Okay, cool. I have some sounds. Now, what we're going to do is go to our preferences by hitting Command, comma, or in just about any program on your computer, if you click on the name of the program, below it will be preferences. And as you can see, it says Command, comma as a shortcut. All right, so let's go down here to the MIDI port section. I'm going to unplug this Qneo and see what happens. Oh, it disappeared. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Let me plug in this little Q Nexus and see what happens. watch the screen. Come on, there we go. All of a sudden, Q Nexus appears. Port 1, port 2, port 3. Okay, so I will just use port 1. We can't get in deep into this instrument. But as you can see, I can now play it. Now, what's really, really important is to understand track, sync, and remote. Track essentially should say note number. If I turn this off, you don't hear anything. The notes do not get played. Remote should be more like continuous controller numbers, letting those flow through on or off. So expression or not necessarily volume, but expression or modulation, pitch bend and things like that will flow properly. And the sync button in terms of MIDI is kind of an interesting animal. It allows Ableton to control other boxes' tempos. Let's just try that once. I'll bring these up and start Ableton. So that's the octave track. And this is my analog rhythm. And if I change the tempo here in Ableton. All right, so sync is very valuable. Turn those down. And that actually flows out of, let me go back to my preferences. Audio tab. That is flowing out of my Focusrite Thunderbolt. That is my audio interface. I know that Emily has shown you several others. So that's mine. And it's going out via MIDI into these boxes to sync that up. So the Electron gear, if you have any, does like to use the actual 5-pin MIDI cable to communicate. The USB is also possible in many cases, but this gear likes the MIDI cable for that. I digress. All right, one other thing that I'd like to show you is let's unplug the Q Nexus and see what happens. Boom, it goes away. I'll plug in my Cuneo, and that should come up in a sec. Plug it in, and it works. Now, you needn't set this up every time. If you keep these different pieces of gear plugged in, they will remain in your preferences, or they should, as you've left them. And that will allow you to communicate. Now, let's take a quick look back at Ableton. I have a bass track here and a drum track. All right. And I, for grins, am going to decide that, okay, the drum track is going to be MIDI from the Cuneo. And it's not playing, right? I have to generally record enable in Ableton to get an instrument to play. But if I wanted to have more than one controller happening, that's not really going to work, because any controller I play that's actually set up to work will play the track that's record enabled. So in order to be discrete, I'll say Cuneo, and I have to set it to monitor in. It's going to monitor my MIDI track. Okay. And then I will say analog bass. I happen to have a push here, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I'm just going to select that to demonstrate that I can play without being record enabled. I can take that off of both of these tracks. Two at once. Okay, this is how you can really use MIDI controllers in a powerful way. Before I go on to discussing control surfaces, I just wanted to show you the physical connections for MIDI instruments. I have, let's take this guy again, my favorite red MIDI cable. This is another audio interface. It's an older M audio. Essentially, I have a keyboard here, and I'll put that in my lap. A MIDI cable plugged in, and that cable is going out the MIDI output. There's a MIDI in, a MIDI out, and a MIDI through.